I think I think we're live. So, hi everyone. Well, happy Friday. I know it's that time of year where we're all just getting ready for Thanksgiving, which is this weekend. I can't believe we're already there, right? So it's the weekend. It's full of amazing food. We're spending time with friends and family, and I know every one of you are going to try and be safe and keep others safe, but there is that possibility of the spread of COVID-19. So it might start impacting our team, our patients, maybe ourselves or our very own family. So we're here today to talk about how to be prepared. Because if you don't have some of these plans in place, it can significantly impact your business, your patients. So these are things that we need to start planning out, that if we do have a patient or an employee come into the workforce or the workplace and expose others, are you ready? So that's why we're here today. I brought back with us our lovely Olivia. She's Stream's HR expert and chartered HR professional to talk about some of the different COVID-19 scenarios and what we should be thinking about and what we need to start doing right now to be prepared. So welcome, Olivia. Thanks for coming back on with us.
Thanks for having me.
So before we get started, what's your plans for the long weekend?
I want to hang out in my PJs. That's what I want to do.
That sounds
Just
pretty
relax.
nice. Sounds pretty nice. PJs and lots of good food.
Yeah. What about you?
Pretty much the same thing. I think, you know what, this probably seems a little boring, but probably preparing the house for winter, getting the winter gear and the clothes and everything like that. So that's the plan this weekend, plus a lot of good food.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, let's dive in. I know we've got quite a few people here who are watching us, so thanks so much for joining. This is a live conversation, so if you guys have any questions, please type in the comment section. We'll be able to see all of those questions that you have and answer those here live. But Olivia is going to walk us through our very first scenario. So what happens if we have two employees who need to be quarantined and therefore will be off and out of the office? How should we handle that?
Yeah. So with this sort of situation, pretty much the only thing that we can do is the same thing as if one employee was off. You basically just do your best to find coverage and you make do. But overall, people are still being fairly reasonable and they understand the circumstance that we're still within with a global pandemic. Obviously, there are some patients that aren't going to be very understanding of this. However, it's not going to be the majority of people that you're interacting with. So at this point in time, we're definitely recommending if you can err on the side of being overstaffed rather than understaffed, you'll just be more better off and be able to provide, more uninterrupted service throughout the pandemic. However, there are costs involved in doing that and your profit margins could drop substantially, especially if you've got multiple team members that are going to be off for a period of time. So you really just have to, at this point, determine how risk averse you are and make the best determination from there. One other aspect to be mindful of is your COVID-19 exposure response plan that you have in place within the practice. So you need to look at what you have in there, what your procedure is for if there's a confirmed active COVID-19 case within your practice. If there was ever an exposure, is your team confident that they know what steps they need to initiate in response? So basically, when everyone knows and understands what's within the exposure response plan, then it removes the chances for any misunderstandings or miscommunication between employees. And simply, it just makes it clear what everyone's expectations are. So at this point in time, we really need to focus on our company culture so that if we do have multiple employees that are going to be off for a period of time, the rest of our team can work together and support those individuals who need to be off from work without damaging the long-standing viability of the practice.
Definitely a lot of great things to consider. And especially, having that COVID-19 response plan, that's huge. It's again, that's being prepared. It's being proactive. We're not just going to wait until that situation actually happens and we go, okay, well, I guess what do we do now? What's the next step for, cleaning the practice and, coverage of those types of pieces. So definitely great points there, Olivia. So what if, let's say, for example, we're focusing a little bit more about employees, but there's another main person in the business that could be impacted by COVID, and that could be the docs themselves.
Yeah. And unfortunately, that's something that people don't talk about. So I think the main thing that we need to consider here is if you get sick as a practice owner, What's your business continuity plan like? So would your business continue to run if you were off work for a period of a few weeks? But I want you to notice, I didn't say would the business run effectively or would it run efficiently? I said, would the business continue to run? So that's something that we need to consider there, because you'll likely need to get another dental practitioner in there to cover for you while you're off sick, the same as you do when you're on vacation. However, what about the rest of the business operations? If you maintain most of the operations within your brain and don't have the documentation or the training to support the practice, even when you're not there, then your results are likely not going to be super ideal through this situation. But one test that we've been working with practice owners on, one really easy test to determine how self-sufficient your business is to ask yourself, when was the last time you took an extended vacation of 2 weeks or more? Mm-hmm. And then when you did that, did you shut down your office or did it continue to operate without you? Or, some practice owners haven't been able to take a 2-week or longer vacation since they owned a practice either. So that's something to consider too. Yeah. So I guess if you've never felt that you've been able to take an extended vacation because you're worried about the practice, that should be your first red flag. Yeah. Even if you're shutting it down during your vacation time, that's another red flag, because you're telling yourself implicitly the business cannot run without you. Mm. So essentially, in a well-structured practice, like the startups that work with us from day one, they know that as long as they can get another doctor in there for patient care, that they can take time off and they can still be profitable. And they can also know that their practice is going to do well, whether they are there every day or not. And this is also how we help those practice owners go from owning and operating just one office to owning dozens across the country. And I think that the biggest piece of resistance that we commonly hear is that it's too hard to do this, or there's no time to implement these things. Therefore, these dreams and goals never happen. And then all of a sudden you've been a practice owner for 20 years and barely ever taken a day off of work. Yeah. So what I can tell you is that when it comes to difficulty levels, most practice owners we work with are doing some seriously complicated dental procedures that are much more technically difficult and stressful to complete than implementing a comprehensive HR and business management program is. However, the dental procedure is usually completed within a few hours. A comprehensive HR program will take months of consistent practice and training to get it up and running to a level where you can feel more comfort and more freedom as a practitioner. So I try to always spin these things to have a bit of a positive front to it, right? Because we've spent 9 months or 6 months, 7 months. Time is just a construct now with COVID, and it's changed how our perspective is into looking at the future. So I think COVID-19 has allowed us to put many things into different perspective and determine what kind of business owners we want to be. So do we want to just generate a job for ourselves and generate some jobs for our employees? Or do we want to create companies that actually leave a lasting impact and a legacy on our communities? Even more so, as a practice owner, you need to ask yourself what kind of quality of life and work-life balance you want to have. And it really is that simple, but it's become painfully apparent as we see practices that are on the brink of bankruptcy due to the practice owner getting sick and needing to take a few months off work, which would also mean completely laying off and terminating employees. The severance obligations are huge, and it can be absolutely ruinous to a business owner. But one last thing that I want you to consider here, because again, we've got our pandemic blinders on, and I want you to take them off. We're not racehorses right now. We're just talking. We're just having a conversation. I hate to say it, but what if you as a practice owner, what if you got a cancer diagnosis? Like, what if you had a heart attack? There are so many other things beyond COVID-19 that can take you out as a business owner. So you need to determine, if that was to happen, am I okay with everything just going bust and that's it? Or do I want something to come back to?
I mean, there's so many great points that you just walked us through, and a lot of things that, like you said, I think all of us, and me speaking as a business owner as well, is like you just keep thinking about the to-do list and what do I have to get done now, and maybe the next 3 months or the next year. But then we don't really kind of what's the word I'm looking for? We're not really calculating what happens if I'm not there to make all of these other things happen. And like you were saying, COVID-19 was a huge eye-opener, and we're all kind of reevaluating certain things and making some pivots within our business. And I think this is another aspect and another avenue or layer that we should also be looking at as well. Is there's so many different factors that are out of our control, but at the same time, we still need to do what we can to control and mitigate the risk in the situation. So like you were saying, just having those continuity plans, that's huge. So I know we kind of looked at a few different scenarios, what ifs. Now let's look at, okay, what do I got to do now so I don't get to the what ifs?
Yes.
Or I'm ready for the what ifs.
Exactly. Trying to avoid all of these hypothetical situations as best as possible. And then beyond just the avoidance of them, we want to make sure that we've got a plan ready for them too. So as I just mentioned, I know that our practice owners are completely swamped right now, which makes getting your HR up and running even more important at this time, because these docs are absolutely drowning in work while just keeping up with everything within the practice, within their day-to-day operations. And this is where we really start to see these things slip through the cracks. The overall communication as a team starts to go downhill. People are extremely stressed. And I'm sure we can all recognize that we act differently when we're stressed and when we're upset than we did, when life was easier, this pre-global pandemic. And we're also collectively, as a society, so incredibly fatigued from the pandemic that the kind of stress and adrenaline that was injected in our society this spring is not viable for a long-term period. It breaks down our immune system. It makes us even more susceptible to getting the virus. And we're getting tired of actively trying to avoid it. So it's a negative spiral, really.
Right.
Yeah. So at this point, my biggest piece of advice for practice owners right now would be to step back and actually, think about some tangible steps that can create that tactical plan of action. So first thing that I would do would be to, work on that COVID-19 exposure response plan. Get that plan of action actually in place. It does take some time to create it, but then you've got it for when you need it, and you have to just, on a snap, be able to put it in place. Otherwise, if you don't have it ready, we're talking a week or two to create it, and by then, it's just a nightmare. Yeah. So within your COVID-19 exposure response plan, you need to ask questions like, what are the steps of action if there was a COVID-19 exposure in the office? Mm-hmm. And what if there was a school closure and some employees need to take some sort of childcare leave? Then on top of that, we need to start looking at the connections that our employees have. So what would our action steps be if an employee had a primary contact with a symptomatic person and now they're waiting on a test? What about if they had a secondary contact with someone who is, let's say, symptomatic and is now self-isolating? Or what if they had a tertiary contact with an asymptomatic person who is self-isolating due to being in contact with someone who is also asymptomatic, but who had contact with someone with symptoms? Like, you can really see how you can just continue down the rabbit hole as you dive into these questions. But I'm not kidding you when I tell you that these are the questions that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. Even just last week, I got a call from a practice owner, and I had to think about how I was going to explain this too, because it gets a little confusing. But basically, it boils down to that the employee went to, we'll call them friend A, went to their house on the weekend. Friend A got a call from friend B the next day.
Okay.
Friend A and B saw each other a couple days beforehand. Okay. Friend B found out that their spouse was in contact with someone who had symptoms and was now waiting on a COVID test. So literally, it was our employee who hung out with a friend who hung out with a friend whose spouse worked with someone who had symptoms and was now waiting on a COVID test. So, the stages of this pattern, it's so hard to be prepared for everything. But if this doesn't speak volumes to the confusing work that our contact tracers are completing right now, then I don't know what does. But employers are consistently having their team members come up to them and ask these questions, and employees truly expect an answer right now, which is so hard, because even as an HR professional, I'm going, okay, hold on, I have to sit down. I got to write that all out. I got to see what's happening. What is the timeline here? But if I was also managing a full patient load and trying to keep up with ordering demands and PPE stock, like all of that, I wouldn't even be able to process it. So I guess the biggest piece of advice I have right now is to create a COVID-19 exposure response plan to cover your bases up to a tertiary contact level if you can, or of course reach out to, our team could definitely help you with that if you needed some guidance on, what's the difference between the secondary or tertiary contact level. Like we're ready to support you for that. Then the next step would be to ensure that your team is trained on all of these situations and that they get a good general working knowledge of these policies so that they feel a little bit more prepared for if any of these things were to happen within the practice. And then, of course, the next step is to make sure that your OHS is compliant with all of the legislative updates regarding COVID-19 and that your team has been trained on them, and that your employee handbook reflects all of the changes that have happened since last February. And then probably the most beneficial piece of all of this is making sure that your management team has really, really solid training on this. Because you've put so much effort and so much legwork and time and financial investment into creating a viable business that you really owe it to yourself as an owner to not risk everything that you've worked so hard for because you don't have the time to effectively implement compliant policies and relevant trainings within your day-to-day operations. Mm-hmm. So the best part about doing all of this is that even if you don't have any pandemic-related closures in the future, you still get to reap the benefits of implementing these things. You're going to have more freedom to pursue other ventures. Maybe do you want to go and do some research? Do you love to teach? Do you want to open another branch? Do you want to purchase another practice? Do you want to run a marathon or spend more time with your family or volunteering or with your dog? Like, it truly doesn't matter what your operation, what your motive is. All you need to remember is that you owe it to yourself to build a strong foundation for your legacy so that you can truly sleep at night and not stress about every single little detail within the business.
Yeah, so much great wisdoms and nuggets to really take away. And, I think the one point that really resonated with me, and again, we've been fielding tons of calls and the practice owners get these questions all day. Mm-hmm. Scenarios happen. I get a phone call, somebody from an employee's child now, somebody in their class now has it, and now they have to isolate, so now they have to stay home. So again, that cycle continues. But again, we don't want to spend our time trying to figure out what the answers are. Mm-hmm. It's important for us to really make sure that we've got scenario 1, 2, 3, and so on, and then how our protocols are. Mm-hmm. And then not only just building that manual or that COVID-19 response plan and just putting it on a shelf and filing it away. This is something that we should be discussing and having a team meeting around and doing it a couple times. We might have to just kind of remind ourselves, and maybe during this time or the holiday season that's coming up soon as well. Mm-hmm. So what are we going to be doing to get prepared for that? And just having those pieces to communicate with the team so we're they're on the same page and they know how to keep themselves safe as well as their family. So lots of great information. Thanks so much, Olivia, for joining us, and I hope that you enjoy your Thanksgiving with all of that.
You too.
Food and enjoying that time off in your pajamas.
I can't wait.
But we're here to help if you guys have any questions, if you're feeling a little confused or overwhelmed when it comes to putting those, updating your employee handbook or those COVID-19 response plan. Contact us. We're here to help. We're here to help you through navigating these uncertain times and just being there to support you on that aspect. So feel free to reach out. And we also do have a COVID-19 resource page as well. So if you go to our website, I'll put a link on here so in that way you can access that. But there's a lot of different scenarios that walks through what happens if there's a school closure, what happens if, again, a team member comes in sick. So these are all the things that we want to make it easy for you to be able to access. So thanks so much for joining. Hey, I see Ken on here. Hi, Ken. Thanks so much for supporting us. It's great to see you. And yes, feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions, but enjoy this long weekend.
Thank you.